Hey, everybody. Josh Sheridan here with the Barely Legal Podcast. On today's show, I have Michael Sinclair, who is I don't know if I would call him a multimedia artist, a mogul, a producer, a director. He kind of wears many hats. I was lucky enough to kind of learn of him through one of my guests from last week, Andrew Domestico, whose episode actually airs today. They're kind of partners and have worked together on a lot of ventures. I believe you're shooting some sort of a movie or something right now. Is that correct?
I'm in post-production on a short film we did together called Lonesome Wolf. Okay. It's based off the Herman Hesse book Steppenwolf.
Okay.
And I'm doing all the audio dubbing and the Foley work right now, but Andrew Achilles Domestico acted in it, did the score, helped me on the production. Yeah, we have a real back and forth with projects and stuff.
And you've worked with him a lot, I know, on his Blade of Surtur project. And
since the beginning, since his first album he put out that was hip hop 4 years ago, I literally bought a camera so I could do videos for him for that album.
Now, you guys have known each other for how long?
Technically since elementary school.
Okay.
But we didn't start hanging out till the end of high school. Through parties, we kind of partied together a little bit, going to keg parties in high school.
What high school did you go to?
Gaither High School.
Okay, yeah.
Class of 05.
Okay.
We're old men now, but but then, you fall in and out with people, something not bad, but people come in and out of your life. And then probably the past 8 years or so, we've been really close and kind of evolving as people together. And you kind of stick around the people that help you evolve better. So, we have a very tight group of friends. And, yeah, I talk to him every day.
Well, I have, so I've been doing this podcast since, I'd say October of last year. Originally, I was kind of, they say you go with what you know. So I was pulling attorneys and all these things. But as you can see, just looking around the room, big movie fan, big music fan, big skateboarding fan, art in general. And so that's always been what's interested me, what I wanted to talk about. So, as I've evolved, I've gotten to learn and know more people in the local community, whether it's Ray Roa, who we were just talking about before, people who work with Creative Loafing, the local music venues, the record stores, and then musicians, of course. And through that process, at some point, I became aware of Andrew, and I remember specifically what it was. And if I recall from his interview, it was a photo that you shot, but it was the Marauder cover. Were you involved with that?
Yeah. Everything that he's done visually, I've been involved with.
Okay, so at some point along the way, I don't know if it was a people you might know or this album or whatever, but I saw the cover of that album and it just right away jumped out at me. The coloring of it, the look of it, it had this very kind of for me, it had this kind of very 70s feel of like they had that heyday of cinema in the Dog Day Afternoon and Apocalypse Now, and a lot of these just kind of rough looking men, but kind of dandied up in a nice suit and, a tough look to it. And I remember seeing that cover. I was like, what is this? I didn't even know what type of music it was. I didn't know who he was, where he was. I didn't know if he was a local guy or whatever. And listened to it. And as I've told him, I'll tell you, I'm a big Queens of the Stone Age fan. So I like a lot of the desert rock, desert metal music. And that was definitely something that I could hear in the music on that album. So as I started to go back and see some of the other stuff that he did, and then also a big metal fan. So when Blade of Surtur stuff started dropping and seeing those pictures, I mean, that just spoke to me in a big way. So it was really cool when I got to interview him finally last week. We've been talking about it before the whole COVID thing happened, but that's how I learned about you. So I was like, oh, I got to get this guy in and talk to him right away.
So that Marauder picture, it's why me and Achilles work so great together, because that was his color scheme. He's like, I'm going to wear the blue suit in front of this backdrop. I showed up at his house. I was like, listen, we're going to have to shoot before the sun's in the sky. I showed up at his house at 7:30 in the morning. We did that shoot. I worked on the composition of the album on the photo, making sure that we could put the Marauder title on the top and stuff. And an hour later, I sent him that final, and then he put the text on, and boom, he had his album cover by 9 a.m. that morning, And then that afternoon, we went out and shot some photos for the Frazetta girls, which is Frank Frazetta's granddaughters.
Okay.
They sent us some clothing to promo form.
Right.
And, we just work like that all the time, where it's, he has an idea, I have an idea, and they just always mesh together.
Well, so how do you view yourself? Because, in introducing you, trying to think of what I call you, how do you identify? How do you self-identify?
Honest, an artist.
Yeah.
I think that's the easiest. I paint as well and stuff, but sometimes people call themselves an artist, and maybe it almost sounds hoity-toity to me in a sense.
It sounds pretentious,
a little bit,
but in the lack of a better,
right. And that's why I got the camera is I wanted to be an artist, and I can't draw really well. I'm not technical that way, but I always had that kind of left brain artist thinking, and I just never knew how to express it very well. I'm pretty good at writing, but getting that camera, led me into photography and video and being an artist that way. But that I didn't get a camera to be a photographer. I did it to tell stories through short films. That was my goal.
When did art become a part of your life that you recognized as being something that was important, or
Probably it was after I saw a documentary on the artist Marcel Duchamp when I was about 22, and he did like the fountain, which is a urinal with a fake signature on it, and he did these different art pieces that kind of broke the art world and said you don't have to do these fancy paintings, and it made me realize that anything can be art if that's the artist's intent, so the artist's intent is what matters, not actually what was produced and what people think of it. And I started getting obsessed with art history at that time, and I'm big into people's stories. So, I read Van Gogh's biography, Picasso's biography, and just getting into art that way, it made me realize more and more I wanted to express myself artistically.
So when did you start doing the photography?
I bought my camera about 3.5 years ago.
Okay. What do you, my wife's a photographer too. So
the first camera I bought, I'd never bought a camera in my life except those crappy disposable ones.
Yeah.
I can say shitty, right?
You can say fucking shitty,
okay. Those fucking shitty
crappy
little ones that you're embarrassed to take to CVS because they're going to see all your photos. So I used to take photos with that when I was a kid, but I went, and when I decided that this is what I wanted to do, I went and bought like a $4,000 Canon Mark III 5D.
Ask if you were a Canon guy or a Nikon guy.
Canon. And it's nothing specific on, that's just what I happened to buy. I've upgraded now to the Mark IV, which is
that mirrorless?
No, that's still not mirrorless. That's my next upgrade next year. Yeah.
If you look back, that was my wife's first one before we went to the mirrorless. That's what we used to shoot our marketing videos.
The Nikon I heard is great for portraits too and stuff.
Yeah. So she's an attorney as well. We met each other in law school, but when we had our daughter, who's 6 now, she decided to stay at home. And through that, as all of our friends started having kids and everything, she really got into newborn photography and family photography. And what a world that there is to photography. I mean, it's deep waters.
Yeah, you get into it, and I didn't know what a white balance was, what exposure was, aperture. Yeah, aperture is the big thing, and trying to explain to yourself how a lens, the inside gets smaller, so less light comes in, but then that affects your focal length. And I tell you what, it was just YouTube University, man. I spent hours watching YouTube videos, learning from mistakes. I'm a big believer in that the doer alone knoweth. Okay, that's like a Nietzsche quote, that you have to just go out there and do things. I could have said, I want to make movies. Let me find a guy that has a camera, and let me find someone that knows lighting, and let me find someone that'll write a script for me. But instead, I was like, no, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to show that it's purely my expression. So I better learn everything.
Well, all the art that I appreciate is 100% that way. It's funny because my wife kind of occupied a little bit of both worlds. She did a lot of the YouTube videos, but she also did apprenticeships with some people, kind of seeing their studios, what they did, their spots locally, all that stuff. And then one of the things that we did that was crazy. This is where it almost seemed like a cult, but there's like this famous newborn photographer from like New Zealand or Australia, and she comes over and does these seminars that's attended by like a bananas amount of people. And so there was one in Atlanta, so I went to that, and literally it was assembly halls full of fabric to lay your baby on and backdrops and this type of stand and this type of tripod.
You don't even think of that stuff. You're
I was like,
here's a baby, make sure it's not crying, let's take a photo.
Well, by the way, she got out of the newborn very quick because it's a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, to find that subtle moment.
You know how hard it is to get a subject that you can actually communicate with, that understands, turn your head this way or that way. You've got this, and you got to get them really young, because after they're a couple weeks old, they start moving too much. So it's you got to have a vector of a lot of things go right for you to get that
almost like
picture.
a baby whisper.
Yeah.
And I respect those type of photos though, because good newborn photos show so much expression. Like I've seen some great black and white ones that are just like you see the wrinkles in the baby, and it's not just this screaming entity anymore. It really humanizes the baby.
Yeah. But that said, my entry point or understanding of photography, I wish I had the book here, but I gave it to Dave Decker, who I was just telling you about beforehand. Dave does a lot of the live music photography for Creative Loafing, but I don't know if you know who Glenn Friedman is. He did a lot of the early Run DMC, Beastie Boys. He did a lot of the Black Flag and Minor Threat. He did a lot of the skateboarding. Like I have all the Thrasher covers there. And,
if I saw it, I'd recognize it because those iconic kind of 80s,
well, this
90s.
is like a New York kid got a dime store camera and went to CBGB and all these other places and just, spray and pray, but got some of these iconic pictures that are, I love punk music, metal music. And so my favorite art is skateboard decks, concert posters. What's his name? Greg Ginn, who's the guitarist for Black Flag, Raymond Pettibone. Raymond Pettibone is Greg Ginn's brother. Raymond Pettibone did all of the covers for the early Black Flag albums. That it almost looks like it's Sharpie art, concert art, and it's just very visceral and not very academic. Like none of these people had it taught to them. They were just like, "Fuck it, I'm doing it." Skateboard deck, concert poster, album cover, and so that's something that I've always liked is kind of that carnal.
It goes to show that you don't need the best equipment in the world. You don't need all this schooling and stuff. You just have to have the will and being in the right place at the right time. That guy happened probably to be following bands around that weren't big yet.
Oh, back then photos, for sure.
Right? And then, they blow up, and it's because of these photos that this guy took with the $1 camera.
When people were taking photos of Black Flag, no one knew who Black Flag was. That just wasn't
being in the right time and place.
Oh,
is really
yeah.
important.
DC, New York. I mean, these were just young kids who were angry and getting out there. They could play 2 or 3 chords on a guitar, and they get through a song and a half before it was a melee. And, but that was the scene and that was the movement. And that was.
And do you think that photographer was there trying to make money, or he was
not
there?
At
he
all.
was there just trying to capture a moment and a feeling in time,
Which is kind of how I see myself through this enterprise, because I'm 45 years old. I've been an attorney for going on 20 years. I feel like I'm kind of locked into a life's path, but I have these daydreams of another life path, whether it's being in a band, being artistic, because my formative years, I was artistic. That was a path I very easily could have gone down, but I thought to please my parents or to do what society thought I needed to do. I needed to make money and all this other stuff. And so went to law school and all, So, and it's fine. I'm not complaining about it. It's work and I'm making a wage and that's good. But I had this itch always, this artistic itch somehow to get it out. And right now it's more of as a fan, whether it's a fan of music, whether it's a fan of photography, a fan of skateboarding, fan of like what you're doing. But
that itch never goes away.
Never goes away.
Yeah,
and candidly, and I think you might agree with me, it gets worse if you don't scratch it.
And if you take it internally and say, I sold out on something, because I was managing a restaurant at one point, making a good paycheck and had good money saved up and was ready to buy a house and commit to that mortgage, salary pay, all that stuff. And, I had a life event happen where I just said, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to pursue this for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So I've given myself 10 years.
Are you through that 10 years yet?
No, I'm 3.5 years into.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So I'm
You're
just
ahead of schedule.
I'm just getting started with this stuff. But, I said that, if I can devote 10 years of something that's passionate to me and I fail, that's fine. Because then I can look back at 40 and say, I gave it my fucking best shot.
Right. So, well, you said it too. You don't have to have all this equipment. You don't have to have all this education to put out a good product. And that's one of the things that I love about Andrew's stuff is, his artwork, his music. He's prolific, but God, it's all good.
And he produces everything himself and taught himself GarageBand. And it just comes down to your will.
Yeah.
A lot of artists I make, and I don't want to sound like I'm calling anyone out, but they'll make excuses like, oh, I couldn't get the studio time. Oh, the producer, or that's just all bullshit excuses that you tell yourself why you're not doing what you're supposed to do.
Right.
If you really want to do it, you just sit down and you fucking do it.
Find a way. Yeah. So, I was talking to him, and I knew that I knew he had a fascination or some amount of fandom for movies, but he, during the course of his interview, said to me that they're probably pretty equal, his love of music and his love of movies. So, what was it that spoke to you? You said that using the camera to shoot film and that sort of stuff, was film always been something that you've been interested in, or is that something that's grown over time? Or
I mean, I've always enjoyed films. It definitely as an early teen and stuff, I'd got into. That's when I really started getting into Kubrick and all the Donnie Darko and kind of cult films that that weren't as well known maybe to my peer group at the time. But I never considered myself going into filmmaking. I always enjoyed writing and writing stories. But I don't think it was until the past 5 years that I really decided that I think filmmaking is the best art form for me. And filmmaking is the combination of all arts. It has the music aspect, it has composition like photography. You're dealing with color design just like a painter would deal. Like, okay, I'm gonna have a red wall, so I'm gonna have this character wear a blue shirt because I want him to be the focal point. And putting that all together, it's the combination of all the arts into one form, and it's almost that apex of art for me. And when I realized that, I'm like, I think this is the route I need to take.
well, and it's all a tool to get well, if it's done well and if it's done for the right reasons, there's a voice there that you're trying to communicate something.
Everything is amplifying that voice somehow.
Have you spent much time ruminating on your voice? What it is you want to say? What it is that you're trying to accomplish? Whether it's just an aesthetic.
So I wouldn't say I sit there and think about it, but I can look back now at God, I think I've done 8 short films or something, and now seeing the similarities in it. So you'll never see a cell phone in one of my short films.
And why is that? Do you want it to have a timeless quality?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want to date things, and or someone say, "Oh, you can't type like that on a phone," or you know what I mean. And I don't go for specific genres. Like a lot of people, they just want to make a horror film, or I never really go with that intent. After the film's done, I'll look at it and I'll be like, I guess this is kind of a suspense horror type of deal, or my version of a comedy was me dressing up as a clown and eating dirt. So I never go into it thinking about what genre I want to accomplish.
Do you like Harmony Korine?
I do. Growing up as a kid, those were impactful. Gumo and Julian Donkey Boy
And Kids.
I mean, Ken Park. I don't know if you've seen Ken Park.
What was the one where he gets in fights with everybody? He gets beat.
So that never actually got full release. It's called Fight Harm.
Yeah,
and it's a documentary where he goes and picks fight with people.
Just gets the shit beat out of him.
And his friends had him stop doing it because the last fight he got in, someone hit him in the head with a brick.
Yeah,
and they said it was against he shouldn't be doing that for his health. But that's another guy that he just went out and did it. He was following skateboarders around in the 90s.
Well, for sure. I say that name because a lot of what you're telling me reminds me of, I don't know how much he enters into something with an idea of what it'll be. He kind of finds out what it is.
Unless it's, I think, Spring Breakers, which say what
More
you want
recently,
about it. I think he said, I'm going to do an anti-Spring Break party film.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So you go in there saying, actually, I want to kind of give a fuck you to a genre. That's a little bit different of a mindset. Yeah.
Well, that movie, and then I didn't see the most recent one with Snoop Dogg and Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of Beach Dog, I forget.
He's gotten, I don't want to say more commercial, but his aesthetic is different in the last 2 films from the original
Even
ones.
the shooting style and the digital style and the saturation of his colors has completely changed from, if you look at a Julian Donkey Boy, which he was working in a film theory called Dogma 95.
Right, which is
Lars von Trier and a couple other people wrote it up, and it's like everything has to be natural, no set building. You're going to use this type of camera. And he stuck to that for a while. And granted, he's expanding and he's getting a lot bigger budgets, which means there's producers, which means you have to make other people happy.
For sure, yeah.
And that's just the progression, I think, of filmmaking, though, is that the bigger budgets you get, the more people you have to make happy.
Well, you mentioned a big one for me, which is Lars von Trier. I got really into those movies and, started watching them. I think the first one I saw was Dogville. I think it was Dogville. What was the one where they traced the set on the floor in chalk?
Yeah, that was Dogville.
Dogville.
Yeah.
I know Breaking the Waves, I think, was like his first one, or Dancer in the Dark, or whatever.
Breaking the Wave was before Dancer in the Dark. Breaking the Wave got big because the actress was nominated for Best Actress in that.
And then Bjork was in Dancer in the Dark.
Yeah, that movie, I watched that like once a year just to remind myself of things. Like, that is just such a good movie to me.
Well, what was the one though? It was called like the Four Obstacles, and it was like he had all these filmmakers and said you have to shoot a film with these obstacles in it.
I haven't seen that one because that one's, I think, is in Danish, and I haven't watched. Sometimes
it's tough.
I avoid sometimes the foreign language films because it is a little bit tougher of a watch. I haven't seen that one yet though. But Lars von Trier, he's someone. He started out. He made a pretty traditional film. It was a World War II film, and the name of it's black and white. I'm lost to it now, but even Breaking the Wave was semi-traditional. The story was a little bit weird, but he really does things his way.
Well, and he's a instigator, or he's
agitator,
instigator
on purpose, and that's
very much he's trying to pick at scabs and trying to poke people and kind of get. Which I guess ultimately the intent is maybe to give people a different perspective on maybe some perceptions that they have or platitudes that they have. But I mean, the one that I was most impressed by was Nymphomaniac. The one that spoke to me, the one that I thought was most beautiful was Melancholia. I mean, that was just the soundtrack to that movie, the composition,
and Kirsten Dunst. You knew like that depth of feeling you got from her,
right? But Antichrist was the one that I thought about the most afterwards, because I was just like, what's going on here with this movie? And then that last scene where they're all coming up the hill at him, and it's just
all
like
the kids or whatever.
Yeah, and it's just like, what is going on?
So after you watch that, what do? You go and Google that shit. And be
you start looking up. What does this mean?
The deer symbolism, this type of stuff, and then and this goes back to me being interested in artists and their story. You go back to, it was Lars von Trier was dealing with loss in his life at the time. And that's how
he lost a child, didn't he?
I don't know if he lost a child, but he was dealing with something.
Because that's what happens in the movie. So maybe I'm mixing up the two.
I don't think he actually lost a child, but he lost a relationship, I believe. And he went away to an asylum. He went away to a place to get better, and he wrote that while he was doing it. And people don't like that film because it's either too much for him, or there's a scene where dude's dick gets smashed. But at the same time, art has always been pushing those boundaries.
I think you gotta get a reaction. There's got to be a reaction there, and I don't think we can select. What's the word I'm looking for? I think it's dangerous to only try and achieve certain emotions. I think you've got to achieve the whole spectrum of emotions. It can't just be joy. It just can't be love. It's got to be sadness. It's got to be hate. It's got to be disgust. It's got to be all these different things, because I think you've always got to work those muscles. You can do it in a healthy way, but that's got to be there, I think.
Imagine, so let's use the old story of Plato's cave about the people down there, and all they saw were shadows, and they didn't know what the real world was. Well, imagine it's a person locked in a basement, and they've never seen the world, and all you show them is love stories. They're not going to know human emotions.
Right.
And I think there might be some shitty Brendan Fraser movie where he was like locked in a basement forever and didn't know anything.
Yeah.
It's some,
Blast from the Past.
Yeah. Okay.
I actually like that. My wife and I like that.
Okay. But so if you are truly trying to help people understand themselves and helping yourself express emotions, then why leave out certain things just because it's uncomfortable?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the name of it. So the seeds for this show was planted through my fandom of Mark Maron, WTF podcast. It's one of my favorite podcasts, and he really kind of has a breadth of different types of people on there. But there's a photographer, and I'm not going to come upon who it is during this interview, but I'll find that out and text it to you later. But he's known for kind of startling photographs that are kind of uncomfortable to look at. I'm sure you know who this is. I just can't think who it is at the minute. But I think that's important. I think you to have the light, you got to have the dark. To have the sweet, you got to I think that juxtaposition of opposing forces are important in art.
And just recognizing that those forces are within life. I'm big on Carl Jung, the psychologist, and he talks a lot about, the shadow self and repression of those type of things lead to neurosis. So, for the longest time, they said video games are bad for kids. Well, it ends up actually, that is a good release for kids to see violence in that way and stuff. It's actually cathartic. because you're releasing those emotions. Suppression always leads to neurosis. And that's, I don't try to suppress myself, you know. I came on here hoping I could curse, and I guess I can now. But, you know, imagine you're trying to have a conversation where you can't curse. Now you're thinking about your words more. Things don't come as naturally. It's the same thing with life. If you're repressing things in your life, other things won't come as naturally.
I agree with you completely. You know, I'm not a big video game person, but musically, I kind of am somewhat of, not that I'm super fringy, but somewhat on the fringe. And so, you know, my wife's always like, "You're weird," you know, and then she's like, "Is it okay that I'm not weird because you're weird?" And you know, I want to listen to Jack Johnson, or I want to listen to whatever. I was like, "Well, that's fine too." I mean, there's room enough in the world for all of it. But you know, one of the things that I think about, and this kind of goes back to more my criminal side, is you mentioned the word repression. Is where is the line? Like at some point, there's got to be a line to repress or to protect something. And this isn't. Here's the example I'll give. Is I just finished watching last night. There's a new documentary on Netflix about Jeffrey Epstein.
I had to turn it off after 20 minutes. It creeps me out so bad.
Well, he probably could have repressed some of it.
Yeah,
you know
right. Yes,
saying?
yes.
There's a, you know, there's a healthy expression.
Absolutely.
And then there's definitely an unhealthy expression.
So not even, you don't even have to express dark emotions, but acknowledging them.
Yeah.
Is what I mean by not repressing them.
Right.
As long as you're acknowledging that they're there within you,
right,
then you can actually deal with them.
That's true. That's true. Well, you know, it was funny because at some point along the way, I sent Andrew a meme, and it was like the music I listen to and me, and it's like this ravenous wolf and then this little puppy dog. And it's, in my experience, some of the nicest, most docile, you know, passive people I know listen to, you know, Cannibal Corpse and all these other things.
If you go back to the studies of the world's happiest countries, the top 3 all have metal as their number 1 music.
Yeah, they're all Scandinavian.
Yeah, death metal, all that type of stuff.
They've also figured out healthcare and some other things.
But it all kind of goes hand in hand, which is, you know, you have to be able to enjoy your life and be happy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So whether it's your healthcare or whether it's listening to the music you want to, that's all going to lead to a happier life. Yeah.
Now, are you kind of the first artist in the family, or is there someone else that had it there? Or
my father was really big into drawing.
Okay.
He became an engineer later on and used it towards that and stuff.
Is he still around? Or
no, he passed away about 2 years ago.
My father passed away 2 years ago. Too.
Yeah. Cancer's a motherfucker. You know what I mean?
From cancer too.
Yeah, smoking cigarettes.
Since
13, spent 56 years smoking cigarettes or something crazy, and you know it's gonna get you eventually. But my mother knows. She's more of a social butterfly type.
You have siblings?
I had an older brother. He passed away.
Oh, really?
Yeah, about 8 years ago.
Oh, wow.
About 10 years ago now. God, It's been so long. But
you said older, younger?
Older. Yeah, he was 4 years older, and he was definitely a big influence on me being 12 years old, but wanting to act like I'm 16. So you know what I mean?
How old were you when he passed away?
I was 22.
And how was that?
It was rough. That whole period of my life was really rough. That's back when I was hooked on drugs back then. You know, the pain pill epidemic was running through Florida at the time. This was about 08, 09. And, you know, most of my friends got attached to it somehow. Everyone knows somebody. And
did you do it organically, or did you have an injury that started you on it innocently and then it escalated from there? Or?
No, what happened was I was a drug dealer, essentially. I sold weed, mushrooms, acid, all that type of stuff. And then, how long has it been? Okay, so how long do you have until you can't get arrested for a crime? 8 years or something, depending on.
I'll do pro bono. You're fine.
Okay, good. Well, I didn't do the crime, but a friend of mine knew someone who essentially robbed the back of a pharmacy and got like 10,000 Percocets. Mm-hmm. So I started selling Percocets. Okay, and then that introduced me more into the pill scene, and then I got hooked on the Percocets.
Was this before your brother passed or after?
Before.
Okay.
This was before.
Was he aware that this was going on?
Yeah. I mean, we were using drugs together and stuff. And he was actually living in Hudson at the time that I fell into things. But, you know, and those type of drugs, it's never enough. Cocaine, opiates, you know, it's just never enough. And you go from a 10 milligram Percocet to, you know, at my worst, I was shooting up 30 milligrams of Roxycontin. Oh my God. So almost 1,000 milligrams a day. at my worst.
And where was bottom for you?
So my brother died. That wasn't even bottom because I just used drugs again to cope with it. And then I ended up getting a theft charge, a felony theft charge, a completely nonviolent charge. And that put me on probation. I was unable to complete probation because
putting an addict on probation
it's
is
the
a recipe
worst.
for disaster.
It's the dumbest thing in the world.
Yeah,
there was no
way they're going to follow it.
Because it wasn't a drug charge I was arrested for.
They
I
weren't
wasn't
cognizant,
offered
right,
rehab or anything.
Yeah.
So I tried to do probation for about 18 months and screwed it up every time, whether I didn't show up for drug tests or didn't pay the money. So the Judge Perry, who had a really big name back in the day,
Judge Perry.
He was actually somewhat fair with me. He sent me to a program. It was the Phoenix House in Ocala. And I was there for 6 months and I got kicked out of there for drinking. I wasn't doing drugs, but I went back to drinking as some type of drug. When I got kicked out of there, Perry essentially said, listen, you can't do this. Here's 13 months in Florida State Prison. And going to prison, I did 10 months out of the 13 because of good behavior and whatnot and time served. But going to prison was my bottom point.
Where was that? Where'd you go?
So you originally, everyone from Tampa, you go to the central intake. And my first day there, we're riding the bus from Orient Road to the Orlando intake. And the guy next to me is like, oh, my stomach's bothering me. I'm nervous. I'm like, it's gonna be all right, man. It's gonna be all right.
Were you feeling it was going to be all right, or were you?
I was talking. I was just trying to talk it up to him. You know what I mean? I knew I could deal with prison probably better than most people, just because I'm good at keeping my head down. But the first few minutes we arrived there, they strip you down naked. You have to face each other about 10 feet apart, and they make you squat and cough. Yeah. And it's completely dehumanizing. Yeah. They just break you down there. And the guy next to me.
You think that's part of the reason they do it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They right away, they're telling you, we're in charge. We can get you butt naked and make you do whatever you want. But the guy next to me shit himself.
Yeah.
Went and squatted and coughed and shit right next to me. And I said, this is my first 3 minutes of prison. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
1 year ago, I was sitting at home in a nice neighborhood, middle-class family. And now I'm, sitting here with a guy shitting right next to me. And that whole experience in prison really opened me up to a lot of things, but it got me clean. And I'll tell anyone right now, if you know someone addicted to drugs, prison is the best option. People do not want to hear that.
Yeah.
Rehab, you have this comfy pillow with a little mint on it every day, and you can leave when you want most of the time. I know people have been to prison or rehab 10 times. Prison is the best choice.
Yeah.
At least that's what worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's always the same for everybody, but I do know, a lot of times I have situations where all parents come and they're hiring me on a charge, and they're like, such and such is in jail. We need to get a bond hearing. Let's get a bond hearing tomorrow. And I'm like, do you really want to put him back on the street right now? Because all you're going to do is magnify it, make it worse. Instead of this one charge, we're going to have 10 charges. You're going to spend your bond money. It's going to get us streeted. You're going to have to pay,
And I was in and out of jail while I was addicted, and you spend 3 days withdrawing in jail.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's the most terrible experience. But I probably did it 5 times because I was always out in a week.
I had a friend, he was a prosecutor as well, and he ended up getting prosecuted for accepting pills in exchange for providing representation.
I remember reading about that story.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
I'm not going to give the name, but he was a gang prosecutor. And so when he got put into prison, they knew right away that what he was. And so they had to put him in solitary, and then they had to send him to an out-of-state prison. And he was telling me, once he got out, telling me about the process, and it broke my heart. It made me sad. It made me feel small. It made my world feel small because your view of the world, your considerations, what's important to you is just one small part of what people in this world face. And when he was telling me about his experience in prison, I was just like, my Lord, I couldn't even imagine. He was like, he picked on a lot, and he's not like a big physical guy. I mean, he's not like some street, brawl or whatever. He's an academic guy,
right.
Probably never been in a fight in his life. And now all of a sudden he's got a mark on his back, and so I just can't even imagine.
It's a very strange tightrope that you have to walk when you're in prison. One big thing that I was told when I got there was you stay away from the 4 Gs. the gangs, the gambling, the guards, and the gays. And not the gays because of anything
No, I get what you're saying.
anti-homophobic,
Right.
but it was if you get associated with the gays, and that puts you in a certain category.
Right.
And I was great at staying away all three. I couldn't help but gamble sometimes. I was in there. We would gamble on racing and football and playing poker and stuff.
Well,
and,
so let me ask you about that, because I just from a curiosity standpoint, the way that the media portrays prison, you can't stay away from it. Is that true, do you think, or not true, or maybe sometimes true? Or?
You can stay away from gambling. The toughest is staying away from guards and gangs. But once I was in and they knew I was non-affiliated, and I made it very clear by not talking to certain people, they left me alone for the most part. Yeah. There was an instance when I went to my main camp, which was in Jackson County, which is right near Dothan, Alabama. It's literally on the other side of the state, different time zone. It was a Crip camp run by the Crips. The second in charge was in my little area, and he came up to me and asked to borrow a soup from me. And that's a test, a soup. Yeah, 50-cent soup. And it was clearly a test. And when I gave it to him, I was like, you're going to get it back to me eventually, right? And he's like, yeah, of course, of course. And he came back 3 days later with another soup for me and said, I've never really had anyone ask me to pay him back. The fact that you did that showed me something. And that whole time that I was at that camp for the next 6 months, I was never messed with at all.
That would give me such anxiety because I place so much importance on the dumbest shit in my day-to-day life right now. If I was in prison and saying, what do they want me to say here? I would drive myself nuts.
Right. Well, then
you have to go with your gut a little bit.
Yes, go with your gut. Don't show fear.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some typical things that you see in the movies that are, you don't go punch the biggest person or, you know what I mean? You avoid. But sometimes you can't avoid things. I was approached by 3 gang members and they wanted to kick my ass because they thought I was someone else. I had to show them my prison ID because we were us white boys. We all had shaved heads and skinny. We all looked the same in there, Yeah. And so, you can get into shit without trying.
Right.
I was just very lucky, and I fell into a group of people in there that were all into reading books and working out. That was it.
So I was going to ask you, is that the storytelling? Did you have that in you before? Prison?
Yeah. When I was 6 years old, I was trying to write stories about stuff.
How did your experience in prison impact your desire to tell stories and
reading books? I really was able to just read all the time and reading John Updike and seeing how these stories are woven. And John Updike has a book called "In the Beauty of the Lilies," and it follows 4 generations of American families from the early 1900s to the 1980s. And it was like, this is the most beautiful storytelling.
Yeah.
And it's like, to this day, I want to make it into a film. So being able to read the stories and seeing how these artists are telling their stories made me get into it that much more.
Any other books that stand out as kind of seminal for you?
This Herman Hesse book, Steppenwolf,
Okay.
I read in prison too, which was very helpful about a man finding himself and whatnot. And reading nonfiction, reading a lot of Carl Jung books and going into the crazy Zachariah Stitchin stuff of Ancient Aliens and reading those books. But no, I can't think of the one. My favorite book is definitely Steppenwolf by Herman Hesse. Though.
And so then what you were reading, how much has that impacted kind of your eye, your artistic viewpoint since you've been out?
With how did prison impact that, or how did reading?
Both. Prison reading. I mean, if we're the sum of our parts, those things have to be in there somewhere, right?
I've always been an empathetic person, but prison definitely showed me more empathy because you don't know people's backstories. And that's the craziest thing is you interact with these people every day in prison and you laugh and joke with them. And then I'd be laying at nights about to sleep and thinking, I was just laughing with a murderer.
Yeah.
Literally a murderer. He was 20 years. He slept next to me for stomping some dude's head in. He was in the Hells Angels. And we communicated perfectly fine. He was a nice guy to me. And that showed me we really cannot be judging people on their past. You have to be able to look at a human being and know who they are based on how they treat you.
And that's, I don't know, you look at the news today, this week, you have George Floyd, you have, the riots, you have our president.
I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about
president texting about first the looting, then the shooting. And there is a lack of identification. I forget who it was that said it, but someone was talking about, who was it? I don't remember who it was, but I think think they were talking about Ted Nugent, and they were to talk. I don't remember if it was Joe Rogan or it was Dave Grohl or somebody who probably is more centrist or liberal leaning, and they're like, well, "What was that like?" And it's like we have far more in common than we don't have in common. Even the most diverse people, if you take all of it together, you know, they're 80% alike and 20% different.
Right.
You know,
It's just your environment that's different usually.
well,
you know what I mean? Like people that you
where
see
you
a
start
difference.
out,
right?
your environment and all these things, but the empathy thing, and you know, my father passed. So my father passed away in 2018. My mother passed away in 2019. I was an only child, and they were both raw nerves. They were both sweet people, but they were very affected by life. They had a lot of anxiety. They had a lot of depression, and they dealt with it with addiction. They were both alcoholics, and as they got sick in their later life, you may know this from your earlier experience with pills, but older people get given pills like it's going out of style. They go to their doctor. Here's some Valium. Here's some Xanax. Here's some OxyContin. Here's some hydrocodone. Here's some blah, 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 blah. And it got to the end there, the last 10 years of my parents' life, where they were taking each other's pills and they were drinking it with wine and all this stuff. And I don't have any brothers and sisters. I get calls. Hey, your mom went to the emergency room last night. Hey, your dad fell into the bookcase. And I was like, you know, you guys aren't Keith Richards. You're pushing 80. But this whole thing of we lead lives of quiet desperation. That was, you know, my dad used to even talk about that, and off air I'll even go further down that path with you at some point. But you just don't know other people's struggles,
right?
And being in prison, you know, like you're kind of alluding to, is an opportunity to let's not see the monster, but kind of see what got them to that point in life.
But to be very clear, there are monsters in prison, and some of the biggest monsters are the guards.
Well,
the Stanford prison experiment, if you know into psychology, it is 100% true. The mentality of the guards is one-upping each other. There's no cameras in prison like there are cell phone cameras out now. And, you know, watching that George Floyd tape, I'm getting goosebumps again talking about it. Listen, I saw so many people get fucked up in prison by the guards with zero repercussions. I got beat up, not beat up. I was pushed and shoved down because they thought I did something I didn't do. My cellmate had done it.
Right.
But I couldn't be like, oh, it was him, not me. But two guards came up to me, grabbed me by the shirt, threw me up against the wall, and threw me down on the floor. And, you know, what repercussions do I have?
Yeah.
When you first go into that,
complain about it to the warden. How's that going to work out for you?
There was talks. The warden at the Jackson camp was embezzling money. He got arrested for $100,000 embezzlement. Yeah. But I mean, they're all those were the worst. Some of the worst people I saw in prison were the guards.
Right.
And it's the fact that they're supposed to be there as some type of a law enforcement type aspect, and they're the ones actually doing the worst stuff.
So this is an interesting kind of not segue, but this touches on a question. So one of the things that I've been doing is the elections are coming up in the fall. So a lot of attorneys that I know or some that I don't know are running for judge. And in doing this 20 years, I've run across every kind of judge you could come across. And I've always had kind of a problem with authority. Like, I don't think I could have ever done well in the military. I don't know how well I would do in prison. I have this problem with asking why. And I also have this problem with someone kind of condescending me. I don't know if it's an ego thing, if it's whatever it is. But one of the things that I talk to all these judges or these potential judges about is I ask them what is the most important quality that you think it is to be a good judge. And my thing is always that it's temperament. And my problem with temperament is I always worry about who wants to become a judge and why, who wants to become a police officer and why, who wants to become a prison guard and why. Because some of them want to do public service, some of them want to do good, some of them have a very, idealized version of enforcing the law and want to do good, and that's all great. But a lot of them want to crack some heads. A lot of them want to have power over someone because they don't seem to be able to have it in their life. They've been under someone's thumb, so they want to put someone else under their thumb. And anytime you have a position of power, it's a magnet for people hungry for that. And that's what scares the shit out of me about judges, police officers, politicians.
And unfortunately, with politicians, all that, when people go into it that do have that pure public service sentiment in their heart,
get jaded.
They get so jaded so quick. They're this isn't how things work. It has to be done this way. And temperament is huge with judges because, I mean, go back to like the Kavanaugh thing. That's up to the Supreme Court. They've always temperament is what you should be judged on if you're going to get moved up in the court system as a judge, right? If you can keep your calm in these situations,
apply the law to the facts, and
right, exactly, because the law has no temperament.
Yeah,
the law is written code that's up for interpretation, but it shouldn't be affected by anger.
Yeah, you should get more jail because of judge.
Yes, which happens all the time,
daily. Yeah. So, but anyway, so you talk about some of the ugliest people that you've seen in the prison park, but this brought up another question, and this is one I've always gone back and forth on. Do you think that evil exists? Do you think that like true evil, like not someone who did something horrible, but just someone who was born that way, or just pure evil exists in the world? And I'll if you have an answer, great. If you don't, I can give you an example of what I'm talking about.
So I would say yes. So we label it evil because that's how humans want to do. We want to put labels on things like that. I think the universe kind of is benign in a sense where it's not necessarily good or bad. The universe is just it's just the universe. But there's evil, there's good, that all exists. And some people are evil. They do evil things and they are evil, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I read. I was getting into like the ancient Indian texts, and dharma. Dharma is your duty when you're born, your dharma. And, some people's dharma is to be a piece of shit. And that might and then that is what they're there for. But, I don't necessarily see it as, I don't want to say it's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing, but it's part of the universe. You got to accept it just as much as you accept happiness. You don't want to, look for the good in everyone. Some people are just shitty,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's where it comes up, and as a former prosecutor, and I also do criminal defense, I've had opportunity to represent sex offenders in my life, and I've watched we just talked about this Epstein thing, and whenever I had a case, those cases were so frustrating, more so from a defense perspective than from a prosecutorial perspective. But in either way, most times when you have these cases, they happen in somewhat of a vacuum. So what I mean by that is most people are not molested in front of people. Most molesters do not admit to molestation. Most of them are preying upon children or people who their credibility is somewhat always questioned. So it's very difficult with the vast majority of those cases, as we see them in the criminal justice system, to ever truly feel that you know what happened, right? There was a conversation, when it was Kobe Bryant, when Kobe Bryant passed away. I remember when the helicopter crashed, the first hour on Facebook was, oh my God, he and his daughter, how sad. And then the next hour was, but he raped someone, but he raped someone, but he raped someone. And I am not a big sports fan. I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to have any kind of in-depth conversations. And I asked the question, I said, I don't remember, was he convicted of that? And they were like, no, but he was credibly accused. And I was like, okay, credibly accused, what does that mean? And I was being academic or antiseptic about it. I wasn't, the problem now, especially on social media, is you can't ask a question without it immediately being,
you're canceled.
Yeah, immediately being politicized and all this other stuff. And so one of the things that happened in the chain, and these were people that I, respect, someone said, always believe women. And I was like, do you always believe women, or do you don't? So do you always disbelieve men, or do you, what does that mean? And I was trying to break it apart, unpack it, and say, what does that actually mean? Because if I'm a prosecutor or a defense attorney, or if I'm in a jury, if all juries always believe women and women victims, then what are we doing a trial for? It's you made the allegation, it goes away. And you watch this video of the Ashley Cooper, the guy up in New York, the bird watcher. Did you see that?
Yep.
Well, here you go. She's on the phone, a black man is accosting me and violently.
When her dog was messing with him.
And he was, please stay away from me. And so this this always believe this, or having these general rules, and I'm going way off on a tangent, but I'm going to bring it back into the point that I was making. These sex cases, these, rape, pedophilia, all these things, just the darkest, almost more than murder in a lot of ways, the darkest area of the criminal justice system, the criminal penal code. But I think people are too ready to view that as evil and not as a sickness, or not as a result of a epidemic, or not as a result of mental health that's not been addressed, or not as a result of maybe how people have been shortchanged by the system, whether it's foster home to foster home and being molested, and it's
that comes back to the empathy thing where
So this
right.
actually is the whole point that I'm making. I know I got far afield, but it's so easy. They should burn that guy at the stake. They should electrocute that. Kill this person. Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I don't think life is that simple. I don't think putting someone in that, it's easy to put them in that spot and throw them away. But I think it's more important to say, I say this, let me be very careful how I say this. I was lucky enough to be born a heterosexual man. And so all of my desires are socially accepted, right? But some people, I think maybe from birth, I don't know if it's, just chemical imbalance or IQ or other things, that may have put them on this path that they don't have control over. And even in that movie Nymphomaniac, I don't know if you remember the one point towards the end of the movie where she finds that guy and don't they like trying to get him aroused by a child or something like that, and he starts crying. Do you remember that in the second part of Nymphomaniac?
I'd have to rewatch. I don't remember that specific. That's a long movie.
They go to like break into a house and they have the guy there, and in any event, by no means am I pro pedophilia. I'm trying to say in talking about evil, talking about empathy, I think that there is always a path that gets someone to the point where they're the quote unquote monster. And it's important to take that path into account, because I think only when you understand that there is a path, that something led to that, can you address what it is that led to that.
Right. And there's sociopaths that just don't care at all. But, being able to see those nuances in people's life, that's difficult.
Yeah.
It is much easier to just label someone as a monster. And what they did might be horrific, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't look back and say, maybe this led him to do this led him to be this way. Not justifying what they're doing at all, but just understanding how they got there. And, to bring in movies into it too,
well, thank you, because I don't want this to all be about that.
Right.
I want to kind of get back to the topic at hand.
So there's a documentary called Crumb about Robert Crumb, and his brother was a pedophilia, and his brother knew he lived with pedophilia, and he had urges. And I think he groped someone at one point in New York, got arrested for it, and his brother ended up killing himself because he couldn't live with the pedophilia thoughts that he had, even though he didn't act out on them. So, is there evil in the world? Yes. But it's not that black and white.
It's not
there's nuances.
Not metaphysical. Are you a person of faith at all? Are you a spiritual person?
I'm a spiritual person.
Yeah.
I'm more, I would say, pagan.
Yeah.
I like following the moon signs and stuff like that, and the solar system.
That works out well for Andrew. A lot of his
Well, that's something we bond on. That nature talks to us more than anything else.
Right. Well, he was saying, he's like, I got to get in your mountains. I got to get in your water. I'm sick of this heat. I got to get out of here.
Yeah. It feels unnatural sometimes.
Yeah, it gets pretty disgusting. I was telling my wife and I in February we went to Scotland, and I didn't know Andrew at that time, but kind of, you kind of temporally lose your history and forget when things happen in relation to each other. But I was talking to him, I was like, God, I wish if he's a place, he's Scotland. I mean, it's all right there. All the history is right there. All the feeling, all the emotion, all the fire in the belly. I mean, you're walking around in these ruins and these castles and all this stuff where all this just amazing history happened. And it's all right there to see and touch. And it's so beautiful. And so I was like, I said, you go there, you come back and write probably 20 albums in a week,
right.
It's right there. So anyway, let's skip ahead a little bit. So the filmmaking kind of starts after you get out of prison.
Well, I get out of prison, and
what year was that?
2012. I got out
Okay.
October 31st, 2012. Halloween, special occasion. I took off my prison uniform, that costume, put on my civilian uniform, citizen uniform. And, the first 2 years was rough. I was doing bullshit jobs like call centers that were just terrible jobs. And then I got in at a restaurant as a cook and just worked my ass off. Within 6 months, I was the shift lead. Within a year, I had a key to the store and access to the safe, and became a manager. And once I became a manager, I realized like the felony on my record didn't hold me back,
Right.
because I was able to prove who I was. When they brought me a task, I never let them down. And they looked past my record and saw me as the person who I was and trusted me with that. So I was working my ass off in the restaurant. Back then, the restaurant business, you're working 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
This was before the law changed, the 50-hour max. We were working 70 hours a week, and I was making good money, but I was just drained at the end. My soul was drained. And Andrew he made this hip hop album, and I was blown away that he did everything himself. And I was jealous, actually, in a sense, that
I'm jealous of him.
Yeah,
I'm jealous of you. Yeah.
that he's creating these things and he's doing it on his own. And I start making excuses. Oh, but I have to work. I have to do this. And it's like, do I though? No, I don't. So I said, fuck it. I had 10 grand saved up. I quit my job, got a job as a server somewhere just to have extra income.
What year was this?
This was 2016.
Okay.
2015, the end of 2015. So I actually quit my job October 31st, 2015. Exactly 3 years to the day I got out of prison. That's why I think dates are important and stuff, and momentum of things.
Yeah.
I went to Best Buy and got a credit card, and I lied to him and said I was still a restaurant manager. So
Right.
I got a credit card with 0 interest, and I bought my camera. And from then that point forward, the same commitment I put into that restaurant work to scrubbing those dishes, to becoming a shift lead, and I put that same mentality into my camera work, to where I'm just going to do this every fucking day,
Yeah.
and something's going to come out of it. And it's amazing when, there was no end term, no goal at the end per se. It's just, I'm going to do this. I'm going to become an artist, and I'm going to work every day at it. I have 10 years to make this work. And I've had nothing but great opportunities since then.
So let's talk about some of your work that you've done. I mean, walk me through. You've talked to me. I mean, obviously, the photography, the work that you've done with Andrew, the movies that you've shot. Tell the people that are listening about some of the stuff that you've done.
So it started out, trying to do music videos for my buddies who were mostly into hip hop. And then having the camera that was a really good photography camera, I said, you know what? I'm at all these shows all the time. I might as well start taking pictures. So I started taking pictures of local music events. And that's when I contacted Ray Roa.
Mm-hmm.
I just, out of the blue, I'm a big believer in you make shit happen for yourself. You go out and happen to things. You don't let things happen to you, right? And I just emailed Ray Roa one day, never met him in my life, and said, I have some photos. I hope you might like them. Can I email them to you and let me know? And Ray is the nicest guy. Ray's
a saint. It's funny because creative loafing, I've always been aware of it just living locally, but
Same.
The people involved are just amazing people. Between Dave and Gabe, Gabe?
I know his work.
Yeah.
I know the names. Yeah.
And then, Ray, it's when I bought this building, I knew I wanted to do a mural outside because, I've always, like I say, I always try and insert art into what I do. And, the Tampa Heights and Seminole Heights community, I'm from St. Pete. So murals are really big over there, big over here. And I know I wanted to do something. And when I was in law school, my wife and I would study all the time and have music on in the background. And Elliott Smith was one of the big ones that we could put on and listen to, but still be able to study and concentrate on what we were doing. And so he had the Figure 8 album, which is the swirl of the red and blue line. So that's on that wall out there. And then long story short, I got an email and it says, hey, my name's Ray. I write for this, is that mural? Is that an Elliott Smith thing? I was like, yeah. He's like, oh, that's cool. Do you mind if I write an article about it? I was like, that would be the coolest thing ever. So we talked about it a little bit. He did an article. And then every now and again, when there's been someone of public interest that's, he's like, hey, can you let me know what the status is on this person's case or blah, blah, blah. So I'm always trying to.
So you do a little work for CL here and there.
I'm a little bit of the background the legal, consultant, as it were, for him. But as I started doing this, I was like, I got to get Ray on here because he knows everybody. He knows he's such a broad taste in music and art and all these other things. So I got him, and then my buddy Greg, who plays with Wolfface, he told me about. He's like, you should talk to Dave. Dave does a lot of photos for Creative Love. His band Big Sad's great. He's got a really interesting story. And another thing, so where you said you're from Tampa, you went to Gaither. There's this weird phenomenon with Claire Mel. Are you aware of Claire Mel?
Yeah, I know the area, Claire Mel.
Okay, Claire Mel is a breeding ground for some of the strangest, most beautiful people locally. I don't mean aesthetically beautiful, but just craziest. Keith over at Micro Groove, Rob over at Planet Retro, Dave, my cousin Chris Bryant, who's going to come on eventually, and he's like a Claire Mel historian. Brian Schaefer, who owns Skate Park at Tampa, like all these like people who have kind of struck out in the world and kind of lived these interesting lives come from that area. And that's kind of a whole other...
It goes back to energy and the universe kind of having these places.
Well, you talk
like
about
that.
having an effect on your life, but there was a point. Oh, so Ray, amazing person, and just he was on the show and then gone from there. But so anyway, so you started doing the photography, you talked to Ray and got into that.
Reached out to Ray, super welcoming to me, and posted some of the first photos I took of an event called Wine and Rhyme that was downtown. I was
Wine and Rhyme.
Yeah, it was done by a group.
Rap music and wine.
Yeah, well, they had all types of music actually and stuff, and it was cool. It was at a Nice, which is now closed down, but.
Did they put anything else there? Or is that
I just walked by there the other day, and it looks like there's a different. I forget the name of it now, but it's a different restaurant.
That's Moscow Mule.
Yeah,
Nice.
Nice was great.
Yeah,
but having that confidence of seeing my photo work, I had a camera for about a month, and Ray posted my photos online on CL online, and I think having that continual motivation of confidence was very important. And then people started reaching out to me to do photos for them. I had a friend reach out for me to do a wedding for him, so then I got into wedding videography. I had a friend reach out for me to do some legal tapes for them, and I started doing legal stuff. And I think it's once I put myself out there as, okay, I am a photographer, videographer, then stuff starts coming in. It comes back to you, and it's definitely snowballed into just a great thing to where, Creative Loafing made a post that I had some pictures, and they posted and it said, filmmaker Michael M. Sinclair, and that just made my day. That now it's no longer
filmmaker. That's what you are. That's what we're calling it.
It's no longer restaurant manager Michael. It's actually a title I wanted in front of my name.
Right. What are some of the works that you're most proud of?
My early short films, they all were just the technical things on it just drive me crazy because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But I did this one short film called Affirmation, and it's
do you write it all, or
I write it
except for Steppenwolf, I guess.
Yeah, well, Steppenwolf, it was still written. It was
read the script. Yeah.
It was based on it. No, I write everything. Okay. No co-writers or anything. And I starred in this one too. Affirmation. I had a tripod, my camera, and a yardstick to set focus, and I did everything myself.
Oh, wow.
And the story's about a guy wakes up and he does yoga and reads Zen books, and he tries to combat his depression. He uses a prescription pill, and then life kind of starts getting him down by watching the news and reading the newspaper and certain things. And it's kind of got a harsh ending, but I think that was the first time where I looked at one of my pieces of work and said, okay, I can express something that's going to be universal and that's going to have an impact, and that kind of set me more on towards what I wanted to make instead of, say, some silly horror gore film or something. Like, right. I really want to kind of have some statement on society and make some type of impact. I'm not into the popcorn entertainment per se. I enjoy it for myself every once in a while. It has its place. I go watch Marvel movies. I'm not shitting on Marvel or anything, but some stuff's bubblegum for the brain, and some stuff is a jackhammer to the brain.
So who are some of the filmmakers that you look up to and that you've
the top two that I think are the most influential is Stanley Kubrick and David Lynch. Kubrick's style is absolutely amazing to me.
Shining's one of my all-time favorites, and I know that you and Andrew have
every one of his. My favorite is A Clockwork Orange, my favorite movie of all time. And I think I love that aesthetic, that 70s, 80s aesthetic, cross dissolves, the
Gets
stuff
back to
that's
that Marauder cover. There's definitely a look there.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some films that are coming back to that now. Uncut Gems is one of them.
Oh yeah, the Safdie brothers.
That uses an actual zoom lens.
Did you
lens
see the
is
one before that, the Good Times?
Good Times.
Yeah.
It was all right.
Yeah.
I think Uncut Gems was way
better,
way
but
better.
stressful as shit, man. I walked out of there. I was like,
my
I need
hands,
a drink.
yeah,
I need
yeah.
a drink.
My hands were gripping the whole time, but which was great,
Well, another one is Craig Zoller, who he did Bone Tomahawk. He did Brawl in Cell Block 99. He did Dragged Across Concrete.
Yep.
And they're very much these kind of Charles Bronson, Lee Marvin. Who's the one who did Bullet?
I'm thinking the old Bullet with Mickey Rourke, but
not Mickey Rourke, but that's the old Bullet. Anyway, it'll come to me. In any event, but that 70s kind of hard, just kind of there's a hard edge to it. There's a roughness to it.
And that goes, so it is the character has a hard edge to it, but the whole aesthetic as a film, you have a little grain to it, and everything might not be perfectly exposed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's elements of Kubrick's films that you watch and you're like, that's not perfect.
Yeah.
There's shaky camera work here.
Yeah.
That dubbing's a little bit off, but now they stand the test of time. So if you're making films that you just want to look great in 2020, well, how are they going to look in 2030?
Right.
They're outdated maybe in some sense. That the more timeless feel is much better.
Well, another one of my favorites is Wes Anderson. I've always loved his movies because a couple reasons. One is they are manicured within an inch of their life. You could pause any Wes Anderson movie at any point from beginning to end, and that would be a picture you could hang on your wall. So that's number one. But we talked about needing the dark and the light, and they're these very sweet movies, but almost invariably at some point in the movie, there's a shootout. Someone gets a knife stuck in their leg. A dog is run over and killed. There's always this one part of those movies where everything just kind of spins out of control.
The Life Aquatic is about a kid trying to figure out who his dad is. You know what I mean? Like you can have.
But there's the shootout with the pirates,
right? It's just like Jeff Goldblum. Boat. Yeah, exactly.
So there's always just kind of that one little pop of extreme. Even in the Fox one, the Fantastic Mr. Fox, there's pretty blatant. They're eating their food and breaking the chicken's necks,
right?
And all that other kind of stuff.
That's a good film if you just view it as it's a mockery of society almost. But David Lynch is the second influence because I think David Lynch showed me that you can have ideas that are fucking nuts and not make any sense, and that is okay.
And the thing that's great about him too is there was no softening of him over time.
No,
I was always aware of him. I grew up when Twin Peaks was like on TV. I remember Blue Velvet. I love the soundtrack to Lost Highway. But at one point, I forget. I think it was Howard Stern. At some point, I go to college. I went to UCF up in Orlando from '94 to '98, and for whatever reason, Howard Stern was on the radio there. And at some point along the way, he was talking about transcendental meditation, how his mother was extremely depressed and having all these problems. And I've always been a heavy-hearted individual. I'm easily in my head, in a depression, in an anxious state. Being an attorney hasn't helped that at all. But I started getting into transcendental meditation. I started looking into it, and it's an interesting thing because you actually go and you're taught it, but it's kind of weird. It was very in vogue in Hollywood. The Beatles all did it and all these things. But anyway, so Howard Stern introduced me to it. Well, the biggest advocate of TM is David Lynch.
Yep.
And he started a TM society, trying to have it taught in schools, having it taught at prisons. And he's got these gorgeous videos, speeches, so well thought out, well said, and so clear on what the process is and why it's important for artists, why it's important for just everybody. And that gave me a whole new appreciation for David Lynch, because then going back through the whole thing with the TM is kind of removing all the garbage from your mind and letting it go where it naturally wants to go. And his movies are very much that. Like, there doesn't need to be a door there just because society says there should be a door there.
Right, right.
Maybe this person is walking on the ceiling, or maybe this person is a midget and we're not going to explain why, or this person, whatever the thing may be. And it's so gorgeous because it removes, we talked earlier about Lars von Trier and placing obstacles on filmmaking. David Lynch is some ways the opposite. He's like, I'm going to remove all the obstacles, a linear plot, a hero, a villain. These things are all gone now. And so,
but yet it's still relatable to people. It's not so surreal that it's this crazy art film or something.
There's those too, but yeah,
people still get drawn into it. My favorite movie by him is actually Eraserhead. And
that's the one I haven't seen.
It is.
I got to watch that one.
I first saw it when I was on mushrooms at 13.
Yeah.
And it just changed my life. And the sound design of it, and he just creates his own world, and it takes place in no time. You don't know what period it's in, and David Lynch allows you to forget about the world, and that's why they have it's Lynchian.
Yeah,
it's a Lynchian.
He's created
film.
His own.
It's his own universe, and it's his own feel.
Yeah,
but with the transcendental meditation, his best example that he talks about often is, everyday life you're thinking and you're just fishing in a little pond. Transcendental meditation allowed him to go deep sea fishing.
Yeah.
When you go deep sea fishing, you catch bigger fish, bigger ideas.
Yeah.
So it's all about delving deep into yourself to pull out those bigger ideas. And I've been trying to do TM myself, and it's tough. It's tough to not have distractions. And, I have a mantra I go through, synchronicity of the soul seeks you. I repeat that over and over, and I count 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as I focus on my breath. So I'm using those 3 focus points to not think about anything. And I've come back with some great, insightful things, and I'm definitely trying to do it more, but you have to practice at it.
It's not easy for sure. And so one of the good memories that I have of my parents is in an effort to address their addiction and an effort to address their, mental states, we all took the class together. My dad, my mom, and I got to take so that was kind of one of the last things that we did together that I remember, that I have a, kind of a fond thinking about. And, different people have different views on TM. Some people think it's a,
crock of shit
and whatever. But I mean, there's people that have done it through. I mean, Howard Stern's done it throughout
Jerry Seinfeld,
Oprah Winfrey. Russell Brand is a huge advocate of it, and so especially for the artist, though, just letting your mind kind of go to that place that it doesn't go every day is important. So what does the future hold? What are you looking at? What do you hope to achieve? Where's your
right now I'm focused on getting Lonesome Wolf done and doing the audio stuff.
How long is that one?
It's 25 minutes long. It's the longest film I've done so far.
Okay.
And it's a huge undertaking. I did a documentary on Tom DeGeorge called 2 Weeks with Tom that I released online last month.
Great guy. I talked to him this morning.
Yeah, I talk to him every day. I love that guy. And someone reached out to me with a distribution company. I can't say names just yet, but fine. They want to distribute it on Amazon, YouTube Red, and all that stuff. So I'm having to tweak and blur out some labels and that to get it distributed. And then after that, I have another short film I wrote last year that I want to film in December. It's called Survival. It's going to be black and white, no dialogue, just about one guy surviving in kind of a post-apocalyptic world. And then I'm working on a documentary, because my goal now is to do one short film and one documentary a year. I think that's a good balance internally, to have a selfish narrative that I've created and then tell a real life story. But the documentary I'm going to be working on, I'm going to start it on Father's Day, is actually about my father's battle with cancer. So 3 years ago when he was diagnosed, I started filming things and not knowing exactly how I was going to put it together. And I got like 2 terabytes worth of footage of him getting the first phone call.
Oh, wow.
Being told that it was cancer in his lungs, stuff like that. And, it was shot on a home movie camera, not my expensive camera. And it's just going to be a very raw look into the struggles with cancer, what he went through,
right.
not me, not what I went through, not what my family went through, what he went through, and just showing the actual moments of it coming back, of all these things. And, I've had this footage for 2 years now, and I haven't been able to look at it. And I think just now I've sobered up. I was drinking real bad for a while. I haven't had any alcohol in months and stuff. And I think now I'm emotionally ready to delve into this documentary about him. And so that's my future goal, is I will have a short film and then have this documentary about it's going to be Cancer, a Home Movie is the title of it. And that's my main focus. Other jobs are going to come in. I get hired to do stuff all the time. But I'm not out here to be the best wedding videographer.
Yeah.
I'm not even out here to be the best music video director, the best photographer. I want to make films, and that's the future for me.
Right.
Is making these films. I set my goals. I write out the script. I do it. I don't write stuff and not do it. I just go out and I get it done. And I already have another script ready for next year and stuff planned for next year. And my plans revolve around my filmmaking for sure.
Do you have any kind of room in your life for someone else?
Are
you married? Do you have kids?
No, I'm single, and I've tried to date and stuff,
Yeah.
but it's tough when
You have that strong vision.
my
It's hard,
focus
yeah.
is my focus, and some people need more attention than others. And I'll be honest that I might not be the great person at giving the attention people need all the time because I'm focused on something else. And this quarantine has been a blessing for me,
Sure,
actually.
'cause you don't have to answer many questions about.
Well, and I can. It's given me a chance to reflect on myself a lot, and I
Yeah.
quit drinking during
Yeah.
the quarantine and stuff. And
Congratulations, I went the other way.
yeah. You have the choice. I went the other way at first
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
realized it wasn't
Yeah,
working.
yeah.
But now I'm able to focus on myself now and say, you know what, I am going to be selfish. But by doing that, I'm not going to try to bring someone else into my life right
Yeah.
now. I'm
Well,
just
I think
focused on my
that's-
work. Yeah.
I think that's a responsible way to be. I have a wife, I have a 2-year-old, I have a 6-year-old, and so that and this has made it so that I can't do these other things, and I'm okay with that. But it's important to be honest with yourself about what's important to you. So, that's definitely
Yeah.
Definitely
And honest
to be
with the other
respected.
people too.
For sure.
That's it.
for sure. Well, this was awesome.
Hell yeah.
It
Is
was
that
that's it. But you come back next Friday if you
Yeah,
want. And the
right.
Friday after that, I have especially people like you, Gabe, Ray. Some of these people I can just talk.
Yeah,
forever.
we could have been bullshitting
we
for
could have
hours.
spent 3 hours
Yeah.
on Kubrick movies. But anyway, I really appreciate you coming in. It was awesome
Absolutely.
to finally meet you. I look forward to talking to you again in the future. And
Thank you, man.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right.